All right, what is up, everybody? Welcome back. Darren and I are really going to start to try to streamline these podcasts for you guys. This is actually the second one that we've done today. Super different content, obviously, but want to hop into it because we have a ton of interesting information to get into. How are you doing today, Darren?
I'm doing well. I'm like Solomon said, we're trying to get this so we do it each week and try to stay consistent because we come up with so much information and it's like you can't present everything that you find, but we find all this information that I think's of interest to everyone watching.
I agree, dude. And it gets overwhelming too. Like, look at how many tabs are open. Well, you can't see them because the Zoom audience can't see them, but I've got like 25 tabs open right now. And that's like, I'm sure for you and I, that's a small fraction of how many tabs that you have open on a daily basis. And it's the same thing with me. It gets overwhelming. So doing these types of, I would consider them more conversations. Like it's much better to just ping them off of an alternating viewpoint in this space, like, and I think that's why these are really valuable. I think people like hearing us kind of talk about our opinions on different aspects. So I did want to start real quick, just pulling up the Bitcoin chart. I know a lot of people don't, some people care about Bitcoin, some people don't care about Bitcoin. But what I did find interesting, now this isn't dictative to the whole crypto space, but this goes back to 2011 with Bitcoin, and what I have populated right here are these logarithmic growth curves. Right, this is on the monthly chart. What I found really interesting is that you can go back through the entire history of Bitcoin here. We never closed a full monthly body of a candle below these log growth curves until this bear market right here. This kind of deals in diminishing returns, where if you look at the first bull market of Bitcoin, the explosion as far as return on investment in a percentage standpoint was insane. The second bull market was a little bit less. The last bull market, a little bit less. And then now we're seeing kind of a break down below these log growth curves. So the question that I have to ask myself that is interesting is, since we've never done this before, is this entire model become a little bit invalid to the extent where maybe we do break back up into here again, or maybe Bitcoin does back up into here again. But if we don't, what would a top look like? And let's say we top out at getting rejected by these log growth curves again. I mean, you're looking at like $175,000 Bitcoin in 2025, which sounds like a crazy high number right now, but it's also a number that's a lot lower than a lot of people that are, very much so heavily invested into Bitcoin are talking about. I don't know what your thoughts are, Darren, around, and I'm not saying Bitcoin gets to 175,000 in 2025. I have no idea where it goes. But what are your thoughts, Darren, around these models that have existed, at least for the first, let's say, 12, 13 years in crypto? Models are meant to be broken, right? I'm curious your opinion on that.
I mean, we've seen quite a few of these really long models not play out and kind of prove that they're failures. Like in the beginning of the bull market, I remember quite a few of these different Bitcoin charts that were calling for like millions of dollars for Bitcoin that all got proven wrong. This one, I think right now it's being proven wrong, and it's just going to be something that's something that never played out. What we're looking at though is we're looking at something that went from a few $1,000,000 to trillions of dollars, and in that process, we've added leverage, we've financialized crypto. So what we're seeing right now is also like that these fizzled out bull runs, these no blow off top type thing, is because everything's financialized, everything's got leverage, there's ETFs, there's all this stuff that's dampening Bitcoin down. And we've gone sideways quite a bit. This markets has changed quite a bit from the last bull market. I remember looking at my phone and seeing 20% up, 20% down. It's extremely volatile. Now, we go weeks of 5% up and down, and nothing really big, and just months of that, so this has been very extended. So the way I see this playing out is that you might make another leg down and then go sideways for a while, and maybe the bottom of this log chart is going to be the top at one point, as like maybe this goes sideways for a couple of years or so, and then it makes a bull run. Maybe the bottom of that log chart is going to be at the top for the next bull run. I don't know. The other thing that comes into play is like, what happens to fiat if fiat turns to dust? Like crypto is going to explode, that type of stuff. So like, I do have I can see the astronomical numbers, but with those astronomical numbers, it's kind of like a devastating type situation for the rest of the world. So I'm not exactly rooting for that, but I could see that happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other interesting thing, and I don't want to stay on the charts way too long, but the total crypto market cap, and especially if you look at the total crypto market cap, excluding Bitcoin and Ethereum, is very, very, very young. So just because I pulled up the Bitcoin chart and I was talking about diminishing returns and breaking down out of a historical channel, doesn't mean that the total market cap, excluding Bitcoin and Ethereum, isn't going to form kind of its own log growth curves or whatever that looks like over time. I still do very much so think that there's a lot of room for explosive growth in a lot of different other assets. But when you have enough track record in an asset like Bitcoin, and in about half of the amount of time to measure an asset like Ethereum, diminishing returns is something important to talk about, especially when we don't have regulatory clarity, because speculation can only take these assets so far, right? I did want to move on and talk a little bit about this. So as you guys know, Darren and I, sponsored by XX Network, super honored to be able to, work with people like David Shum and that group. And privacy aspects and initiatives are extremely important. They're only going to become more important with CBDC rollouts in the next central bank digital currency rollouts over the next few years. I found this article to be very frightening. And I don't use TikTok, but I think Darren, you might have, I think maybe you have TikTok, but this is basically TikTok claiming that it's not collecting US users' biometric data, despite what the privacy policy says. And you get down into here and it says, TikTok's earlier privacy policy change had introduced a new section called image and audio information. Under the section, information we collect automatically. Here it detailed the types of images and audio that could be collected, including biometric identifiers and biometric information as defined under U.S. laws, such as face prints and voice prints. Do you have anything to say about this, Darren? I mean, it's pretty horrifying, right? Like,
yeah, so I did make a TikTok account where I post clips and stuff. I just wanted to see, I'm just trying to add to all the social media stuff. But I remember vividly after installing the app, talking to my wife about something and then getting ads about what I was talking about. So them saying otherwise to me doesn't make any sense. It makes sense that they're spying on me. I mean, it's to a point where, their Congress is talking about banning TikTok. So, this is like a form of warfare, and like we're no angels either. We're kind of doing the same stuff to other citizens around the globe. We collect all their information. We run powerful algorithms against people in other countries. So like, this we should be aware of this. We should have some sense that we are being spied on, and this could be the information that's taken from us can be used to exploit some of the patterns and behaviors that we have. Voting's a big deal, and it's there's like bots that try to influence you on what to think, what to say. So you should be aware of it, and you should know about it.
I love how the dude from TikTok says that, or this is a woman, Vanessa Pappas, TikTok representative for the hearing CEO. She noted that everybody has their own definition of what biometrics means, claiming TikTok didn't use any sort of facial, voice, or audio or body recognition that would identify an individual. Okay. Yeah, on the back of that, it's just cool to see some of the stuff XX Network is doing from a privacy aspect. They did post this today. So post quantum signatures for wallets and the like. So obviously we move towards transactions, quantum secure transactions, but quantum secure wallet signatures is kind of the infrastructure around where you would want to go with quantum transactions in the future. And this is through collaboration with ChainSafe. This is fundamentally upgrading the blockchain. This is dealing very much so in post-quantum security to signatures on projects, at least at the interim, that are dealing in substrate. So projects building on substrate. Now pay attention to this because there are tons and tons and tons of projects building on substrate. Akela, Aleph Zero, just roll down through here and maybe call some out that Bifrost, that stand out to me. Bluezell, which I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard of, Centrifuge. I mean, point being, quantum security and quantum resistant networks are going to be extremely important. It may not seem like it right now, but the ecosystems that are not building out for that future, that future world where we do have quantum computing just being a real issue in the blockchain space, these projects are not going to be able to start building when it becomes an issue. So they better be building now, building solutions around quantum resistance and quantum security. So I don't know what your opinion is on that, Darren, or not, but that's kind of where my head's at.
So I've always thought, big tech and government, they're the ones that are in control of the quantum computers. Why would they hack a blockchain network? But I've done some digging, and it looks like just on AWS and some of these cloud platforms, you can access quantum computing now. It's just like a primitive form of quantum computing. So quantum computing is going to be accessible to everyone. And, there's going to be malicious actors that try to steal from people, that try to figure this out, because think about the reward that's involved with you breaking cryptography. It's a tremendous amount of money. You're not going to tell anyone either. You're just going to break it and just move money every once in a while to your bank account. Nobody knows. And you're going to try to do it in a stealth type of way. That you don't know if this stuff's happening now, like you see, wallets and stuff being activated. Like we don't know anything about this. Like we don't know if it's possible, if it's not possible. The experts are saying like 5 to 10 years, we're going to see quantum computing that actually is able to break all encryption, not just for cryptocurrencies, but everything that underpins the internet. So that's a big deal. So big that the president signed the Quantum Act to try to combat that, try to find encryption methods that are quantum resistant, and that's what XX Network is doing. Is they're trying to figure out these encryption methods that aren't so heavy. So like a lot of these blockchains, you can't run these quantum resistant encryptions because they're too heavy, and like the blockchain stores all the data. So if the encryption method is too heavy for a blockchain to work, it can't work. So XX is doing this outside of the network, and then you can tap into the quantum resistant area. So like you can protect your assets through the sleeve network. So it's really interesting work. And we should be aware that this technologies exist, and we should do everything we can to protect ourselves in case there's a malicious actor.
Yeah, 100%. And I was super interested when we did that Twitter Spaces around the sleeve wallets. It's talking about embedding a quantum resistant public key as a backup for any crypto wallet, which I think is a massive use case in this space. So essentially, what it was described to as us. I don't want to stay on this too long, but it's just really interesting, and I think it's a great use case. Imagine when you create a wallet and you have a public key and a private key. One of the devs at XX was basically explaining it is in a simple way where it's, imagine if you get two private keys, and I know this is saying public, but imagine if you get two private. One is kind of the normal private key that you have, and the other is kind of attached to this sleeve wallet, which uses, I'm going to forget what it is. Is it what's the minimum amount of, it's like a quantum signature, right? The minimum amount of information that you would need to prove that you are the person that holds this wallet within the sleeve aspect. So it's almost like a backup to a backup, where if something happens to your private key, you can prove that you're the owner of this quantum resistant signature that accesses the sleeve aspects, and you can still kind of restore or access your funds, which I thought was fantastic. So but moving on, I thought this was crazy interesting as well. This is all fairly new information, but Helium, which is a layer one right now, their developers proposed ditching their own blockchain for Solana. On the back of this, now we'll go over here Helium a little bit here. So this Internet of Things blockchain network Helium could transition to the Solana blockchain following a new HIP or Helium improvement proposal governance proposal launched on Tuesday. The Helium network operates by users installing a Helium hotspot to provide decentralized wireless 5G network coverage for internet users in their area. It uses a consensus mechanism, which is unique, called proof of coverage. Now, this basically says they started their own layer one because nothing else was in existence at that time, and they needed their own layer one. But now they are trying to pivot over and utilize, basically utilizing a new layer one for, I believe it's for token issuance, or for financial token aspects. But then the actual other aspects of Helium would be moving towards oracles. But Hedera has thrown their name into the hat here, essentially, pushing to become potentially Helium's layer one. There's a Twitter Spaces here where this kind of all ties in together. What's interesting for me, Darren, is just today, Helium founders announced a partnership with T-Mobile to launch crypto-powered 5G mobile services. And if you look into T-Mobile, T-Mobile is a subsidiary of Deutsche Telekom. And Hedera throwing their hat in the ring may sound interesting, but Hedera is also one of their governing board members is Deutsche Telekom as well. I guess the question I would have for you is, once we start seeing a number of different things occur, whether that be regulatory clarity or real use of these layer one networks, just because we see a ton of different layer ones and layer twos right now, do you think that at some point in time, you're going to either see migration from these other chains into networks that just have more utility or have more liquidity or have more use cases? Is it going to be more of a plug and play thing with interoperability? Like, I want to use Hedera for this aspect, or I want to use the XRPL for this aspect. Like, where do you see these other chains going? Because Helium's a great example as a layer one that they need to migrate for whatever reasons they need to migrate. What do you think that looks like for other chains or other ecosystems that may need the use cases of other networks in the future?
I mean, I think it's going to be a combination of both. I don't think it's going to be exclusive to just like merge into other layer ones. I think there's going to be plug and play aspects into those layer ones. I don't think it's necessarily going to be one or one or the other. This Helium's announcement's pretty interesting because they are a pretty large use case, right? They're doing the Internet of Things. They're like breaking up Wi-Fi, so you can pay for Wi-Fi through Helium. You can mine it through like a Helium miner that works off of your Wi-Fi and everything. So it's a fairly large use case. They need a very scalable blockchain network, right? So this merging into other layer ones, it's really going to push these layer ones, and we're going to find out if we see a lot of these larger cryptos, take their layer ones and just migrate it and merge it into another layer one. We're going to push these to the test. And I mean, I don't want to like bash or kind of speak down on anything specifically, but I've seen a lot of problems with Solana, so I'm wondering like why they would choose them. And like I know it's a scalable chain, but like those are kind of like a dime a dozen now. Like everybody's like EVM compatible, everyone's got a pretty fast consensus mechanism. Why are they specifically choosing Solana? Did they get a grant or anything like that? Does that matter? And then like, what does the regulatory aspect look like? I mean, if you have a layer one, like you kind of prove that you're not a security because everyone can build on your layer one. But if you're a dApp within a layer one, that's kind of different. It's kind of harder to prove that you're a security versus if you have this open ecosystem where everyone can build on. So those are just some of my thoughts on it.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the main when did this happen? This was like 4 or 5 months ago that Solana was running 30 minutes behind like real time on their mainnet, which is extremely freaking concerning, especially when you're dealing in like let's say that I'm pushing through transactions and I am using my phone and I'm using Helium and I'm doing X, Y, and Z aspects within whatever wireless, whatever I want to do through like a network. Um, this is, I think, why it's really interesting, like for Hedera. Even like a lot of people like look at Hedera and they look at it as kind of whatever they look at it as, but there's three different products essentially within the ecosystem, at least right now. One is smart contracts, the other is consensus service, the other is token service. It's always been really interesting to me within a network like Hedera, like if these networks that have issues with like operating 30 minutes behind real time, if you could use a consensus service that can stand up and that has historically been just extremely fast, extremely accurate, hasn't had downtime. It'll be interesting to see if we see these aspects integrated over time. Yeah, so if you want to check out Helium, I would recommend, if you guys are interested. I think there's 3 different layer ones that have thrown their hats into the ring for potentially being Helium's layer 1. I know Hedera is one. Solana, I think, is the other one, and there's a third one that I am definitely not thinking of right now. But there's 3 different ones right now. This was a pretty interesting discussion here if you guys want to check it out. Okay, so SEC and Ripple seek summary judgment in attempt to speed up the XRP lawsuit. This just came out over the past handful of days here. Essentially, the SEC and Ripple each filing a motion to ask the judge to make summary judgment, which is a judgment delivered on the basis of statements and evidence without a full trial. I don't know if you have like major thoughts on this. I try to basically leave the legal aspects to, the lawyers. Instead of me probably making the wrong assumptions about anything that I would read within a legal purview. But yeah, do you have thoughts on like summary judgment, Darren, like with this announcement? I mean, I think we both can agree that we want this to wrap up as soon as possible, but I think it's going to wrap up. It's kind of a smokescreen to me. So
my thoughts are, like, when we're at this part, this is the reason both parties want to settle this and not, put it up do or die. So I think we're near the end, unless there's like a major vendetta, there's a major type of we want to prove to the world, and that could come from Ripple, that could come from the SEC. I doubt it's going to come from Ripple. I think they'll looking to settle, looking at this to get that behind them. I know they spent like $100 million just on legal fees. The question is the SEC trying to make an example, or they're going to push this to a jury trial? And I don't think that's likely either. I think everything that we've seen a lot of evidence to prove that they don't have a case, right? So do they want to look like fools in front of everyone and potentially lose the case, or do they want to make everyone happy now? They settle, they figure out terms and everything, and then they're in compliance with the SEC. It makes it looks like the SEC won, it looks like Ripple won, everybody's happy, just some money gets transferred over, and everyone keeps face.
Yeah, I mean, even just thinking about it right now, listening to your take on it and watching or reading Stuart Alderoty's tweet here. So Stuart Alderoty, obviously at Ripple, saying, my hot take: after 2 years of litigation, the SEC is unable to identify any contract for investment, which is what the statute requires, and cannot satisfy a single prong of the Supreme Court's Howey test. Everything else is just noise. It kind of makes you wonder, given when the lawsuit took place, given kind of some of the aspects that we've seen or looked into as far as some of these other ecosystems and some of the deals that have been done behind doors, was this lawsuit an attempt to potentially, maybe the outcome is already known to an extent, but maybe it's to stifle the network growth and adoption of something like RippleNet, or the network growth and adoption of something like the XRP Ledger, in a way where other aspects or other ecosystems have a way to potentially play catch up while litigation is ongoing? I mean, I'm just bringing that out of the dark here, but I mean, it's an interesting.
I mean, I think this was a necessary evil. I think there's a lot of banks that are potentially partnered with Ripple, and I think this was holding it back. This is kind of taking a shortcut, cut the line, you pay a fine, and you're labeled as what you want to be labeled as. So in my mind, this was a blessing in disguise to begin with. Me personally investing, I should have did things differently, and I should have had the foresight to see this coming, but I didn't. So me personally, my investment kind of wasn't as great the last bull market because I wasn't as diversified. I was more into XRP, but I think this is a necessary evil, and I think this is a major puzzle piece that's put into the puzzle. And once we have this clarity, a lot of things are going to change.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. I think that whatever happens in this lawsuit, I mean, even along with the library lawsuit, but the Ripple lawsuit is obviously so polarizing. But it's not just polarizing, in a nonsensical way. Like, it's going to have watershed effects across this entire space. I wanted to move forward. This just came across about 3 or 4 days ago. This is the European Central Bank choosing Nexi for a digital euro prototype. Now, if you dig down into this, what's really interesting with me is kind of the aspects that surround Nexi with a group called SIA. Nexi is actually a part of SIA, and yeah, SIA is a part of Nexi, vice versa. Nexi Group brand that provides tech digital payment solutions and services for financial institutions and banks. Many people from the XRP community are probably familiar with SIA to an extent. But I mean, look at SIA as kind of a subsidiary or, within Nexi. And if you go back in history here, there's a lot of integrations surrounding Quant and Overledger. All the way back to 2020, SIA announcing the successful outcome of the blockchain interoperability test, achieved through the integration between SIA chain and the Quant network's Overledger technology. Back in 2020, the statement was, it's the only distributed ledger technology operating system in the world that enables interoperability. Now, moving forward within that, though, there's a great thread here talking about a lot of timeframes, Darren, like you and I see on a consistent basis. So SWIFT being awarded the European Securities Market Infrastructure Gateway provider status. Now, this is June 17th, 2019. And then you get into, let me get into SIA. It's just kind of dates here. SIA partnered with Quant Network on the 5th of June, 2019, and SWIFT was awarded that ESMIG contract on the 4th of June, 2019. It's just always the timing stuff is a little bit interesting to me, but it's not just Quant. I mean, Darren, that we've seen this before. If you want to maybe walk us through this a little bit, this is the blockchain infrastructure through SIA.
Yeah, there's another slide that's pretty intriguing too, that shows all of the payment systems, and then Ripple is another layer that kind of swallows everything with SIA or SIA. So I mean, I know SIA is the EU uses SIA. It's a major payments network, and it's connected to all these different DLT platforms. And now you're seeing SWIFT partner with Nexi, that's partner with SIA chain. And in my mind, these are just platforms, and everything's going to be accessible. So you'll be able to go through the Ripple network through SWIFT, and you just have this interoperability between all these networks. And these partnerships are just there's the SIA group, and then these partnerships are just little bubbles that connect to SIA, and you just have access to those networks while you're in the SIA. So in my mind, just sending a payment through SWIFT, you're going to have, all these different routes to take. So it's pretty interesting. We've been tracking this for a while. So I think what matters the most is liquidity in XRP, and just seeing the liquidity keep ramping up where more payments can be sent through that's cheaper and quicker.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it's about options, and it's not only about retail consumer options. I think it's gonna be about financial institutions options, about how they want to deal in payments or settlements moving forward. I really do think that when we talk about Internet of Value, it deals in multiple different assets potentially being able to be utilized. And I think that the assets that serve the best use case or functionality in any given scenario are always probably going to be chosen, or networks that serve the best use case and functionality within a certain transaction that I would want to make would probably be, well, it just makes sense, right? I'm not going to choose something that costs more, that takes longer in certain corridors or for certain transactions. I'm probably going, well, I guess safety and things like that are always going to be taken into account. So you have to weigh that stuff out too. But I'm always going to want to choose the most efficient asset and the most efficient network. And what we're going to see, I believe 100%, like you just said, you're going to have, it just totally makes sense to have XRP and RippleNet being an option through using the Swift network over time. And it just makes sense to build all that stuff out on a level playing field. Otherwise, you're still going to have silos that exist, and those silos are going to end up being wrecked and broken down by other people that are just not wanting to deal with the bullshit of silos anymore, because the technology exists to remove them. It's just about the regulatory clarity and about building that infrastructure out. One interesting thing was with the Nexi group. This is an SEC report, but this is a Nexi document. Again, we see Ripple being referred to as a stable coin through Nexi, which we were just talking about, SIA and Nexi. So this is saying in the long term, the evolution of blockchain and distributed ledger technology could lead to the growth of new payment technologies, also able to disintermediate part of the value chain of payment cards, for example, through the use of dedicated cryptocurrencies. And then in parentheses, it says so-called stable coins, now essentially used for international payments, for example, Ripple. I don't want to get into the weeds within this, but Darren, maybe real quick, because I know in the other podcasts that we did, like maybe just give a brief explanation of like what you consider XRP and why we do see that verbiage sometimes of XRP being, you know, quote unquote, a stable coin or a stable asset.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the XRP ledger, and we've seen this with XLM too, they call it stable coins, right? But I mean, if you take the ODL model and you put it out of your head, what is the XRP ledger? It's set up so I can issue IOUs, and those IOUs are essentially stable coins. You know, if we're thinking from like banking terms, you know, Solomon Bank issues dollars, and they're going to be IOUs on the XRP ledger. Darren issues Darren dollars on the XRP ledger. And then XRP is kind of the bridge between both of those stable coins. So like really the XRP ledger is a stable coin platform. It's set up for you to make your own stable coins and back them with assets. Now those stable coins can be, you know, anything. It could be gold, it could be whatever you want to back your stable coins with. But you know, that's essentially what XRP Ledger, XLM Ledger are, you know, and Ripple came up with a product for ODL. And really what that's doing is just bringing liquidity to the endpoints, but the ledger is the network, and those endpoints matter right now. But eventually, I think we'll come to a point where the XRP ledger is installed in banks, and they're able to just, you know, set this up. Like if you listen to like David Schwartz interviews about like CBDCs, they're talking about just forking the XRP ledger, and all the banks are set up on an XRP fork, and it's, you know, they're setting up a whole banking infrastructure from a CBDC standpoint that's a clone of the XRP ledger. So at one point, I think the real XRP ledger is going to, you know, link all these together, and you're going to be able to issue stable coins and assets, and it's going to be like banking, but on a distributed ledger instead of like these siloed ledgers.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where we get to. I actually saw the one document that was that it was a Ripple and Hedera document along with like one other project or ecosystem like that came out like 2 or 3 months ago. I think it's called Decoding CBDCs, and it was on Hedera's backlog of like documents. This is like more recent, 2 or 3 months, and it actually did say CBDCs on a side chain. So I really think that the federated side chains that are going to be built out, you know, off of the XRP ledger are almost like the perfect use case for central bank digital currencies, or kind of that banking network. Because, you know, think about a federated sidechain. Within a federated sidechain, you're basically launching, like, however they decide to implement it, but you're basically you're receiving a copy of the XRP ledger at X point in time, right? And that is kind of your basis for your federated sidechain. You can implement anything else. You could implement Ethereum virtual machine. You could do privacy aspects. You could do X, Y, and Z within that federated sidechain. But the basis is kind of a snapshot of the XRP ledger. What you also need within that, because you're really kind of launching a new layer one, or like a new ecosystem, like under the purview of a layer one that just has the snapshot of the XRP ledger. You also need to stand up that network, just like any other layer one would need to stand up that network. The perfect thing in that scenario is, though, is these banking organizations already have node or computer ecosystems built out across multiple banks. So imagine launching with a snapshot of the XRP ledger. Maybe you do want to integrate privacy, but standing up a network is fairly simple because you already have that network stood up. That banking organization with its multiple different subsidiary banks and trust relationships with other banks, they're all going to be incentivized to stand up validators on that network. So it'll be really interesting to watch how federated sidechains play out too.
And the XRP ledger is kind of mimicking banking today. So like, you have Ethereum where you could just, pretty much create whatever you want, but like the XRP ledger is set up for trust lines, for IOUs, so it kind of complements what banking is today versus just like this open ecosystem. So, with a federated sidechain, you can make it an open ecosystem. I recently did one of the videos, metaverse for Fluff World. So Fluff World created a federated sidechain, and they're using XRP to pay for everything. So any gas fee, any type of network chain, you have to pay in XRP, and you get if you're it's a proof of stake chain, so you can stake this other coin that's called Helium and get XRP as the reward. So they like set up this whole ecosystem that's a federated sidechain that's completely different from the XRP ledger, but incorporates XRP for pretty much everything that you do in the network. So these federated sidechains are going to add a lot of demand, and if some of these are going to, all of these are going to be interoperable with the XRP ledger. So you're watching like this spider web of ledgers come out, and they're all going to be connected. So pretty interesting to see.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of deals in, what is it, Metcalfe's is it Metcalfe's law? Am I saying that right? It's kind of like the network growth aspect where the more every additional user on the network kind of squares it up out to, whatever it looks like. If you have 10 users, if you really look at your reach, it's basically 10 times 10, which is 100. If you have 11 users, it's just kind of what you said is perfect. I think the spider web of kind of adoption, it's like really, it's growing out these networks out based on expanding out use cases, expanding out networks, and just tying it all together in an interoperable way. I wanted to move to this, which is PaySend, but I've never found an actual PaySend direct mention of Ripple being a partner. I had a Patreon send me this, though, and it was interesting enough to dive into a little bit. This is PaySend offering instant cross-border payments to accounts in 25 countries for $1. This is the 14th of September. You start digging into the weeds here within PaySend. They started in 2017. You can look at the board of directors here and their advisory board. What's interesting to me is the head of innovation at Swift is on the advisory board. On top of that, what's interesting, which I found when I was trying to dive into this, now this is through the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. This is imfconnect.org. I think this was 2019. UK, so UK-based PaySend announces the launch of the Pays XDR, which is backed by cash reserves and matched proportionally to the IMF's special drawing rights basket. Now, I tried digging a little bit deeper into this, Darren, but I couldn't find any other documents around this Pays XDR aspect. I just thought it was curious, like, that this PaySend company would be essentially matching by cash reserves proportionally to like the IMF special drawing rights basket. I thought it was a little bit interesting.
Yeah, it doesn't make too much sense to me. If we look at what the SDR is today, like say I'm broke and I owe you $100 million, the IMF comes in and gives me a bunch of SDRs that just backs my loan with you. But like it's not liquid. It's kind of just like an accounting mechanism for me to be good on my debt. And to tokenize it is kind of odd to me. If you tokenize something, you can add liquidity to it. You can do a lot of things. So like the SDR is rather young. It's been around for a while, but like we haven't really seen it been implemented. We're starting to see get up there. I think like 500 billion was just lent out, or 600 billion to Pakistan. So the use case for the SDR is still young. We might see it expand, so it's more liquid and stuff, and we might see a different world for the SDR. But today, the SDR is pretty much just like a reserve, like an accounting mechanism for banks. So it's kind of odd for me to see these fintechs, tokenize it. Like, what's the point of tokenizing a reserve or something like that normal people don't have access to? Like, why am I going to pay you in something that nobody else has access to except for a bank on the back end? And like my tokenized SDR doesn't really mean anything. It's just kind of like a pegged token to the SDR price. So kind of weird. We have to dig into it more and see what happens.
Yeah, there's a couple of outlying relationships with PaySend. I mean, they integrated with FinFan here. FinFan obviously has Ripple connectivity. I saw some stuff from Wrath Economan as well, talking about not directly PaySend relationships with Ripple, but PaySend, and I think it was one of the banking organizations. It's definitely a Ripple partner. But yeah, this came out about a week ago as well. This is Swift innovating to remove friction in corporate actions. Now, basically, Swift announcing they're collaborating with 7 securities players, including American Century Investments, Citi, Vanguard, Northern Trust, to drive efficiencies in communicating significant corporate events. The project will trial an ambitious solution powered by Symbiont's enterprise blockchain platform. Definitely an older relationship here, so I don't want to connect dots where dots don't need to be connected, but I did want to present it to everybody because I thought it was at least interesting to bring up. Symbiont works with NASDAQ, which is going to be in our other podcast, some interesting NASDAQ announcements. State Street, Synapse actually sounds really familiar as well, and Vanguard. But if we can go back, essentially Ripple partnered with Counterparty, which is a portion of Symbiont. They're working relationships to launch this Bitcoin to Ripple Counterparty bridge called XCP, and this is all the way back in 2015. What's interesting about this, dude, is this is literally the very first product that Symbiont ever launched as a company, as a Ripple gateway for Counterparty, over which XCP, Counterparty's native currency, or any other, which I think is the key phrase here, any other counterparty asset may be sent. Have you ever looked into like any of the Symbiont stuff? Or I mean, it's just like super old, so it's always like, how valid is this even still? And it could be completely not valid anymore at all. But it always seems like when we find new announcements, if you just do a simple search about Ripple or XRP, like you can always kind of find some weird tie-ins back in the day that just seemingly disappear, like that just float off into space.
Yeah, I mean, this is my point earlier when we were talking about just the XRP Ledger and stable coins. I think a lot of these early partnerships, they weren't ODL, they're the XRP Ledger. So like you look back at like 2016, you see R3 partnering with 12 banks, and they were using the XRP Ledger. They weren't using like an ODL type of platform. So the question is like, what happened, right? Like why would all these different companies partner with Ripple, set up things with the XRP Ledger? And the answer to me is liquidity. I think they set up these proof of concepts to make all these different payment mechanisms and like banking software. But if you can't sell this, if you can't get out of the system and back into the legacy system, right, it's not really worth anything. So they need liquidity in order to like bridge all this stuff to happen. And at the same time, like you said, you don't know like what exactly happened, if there's new technologies they moved to or anything like that. But there's always, every time you find a rock, you look under a rock, there's Ripple. It's like that they're connected to a lot of this stuff. So it's not meaningless to me. Some people will make the point it's so old, it's meaningless type of argument, and I dismiss that argument until I find something that says, we close this, or we're not doing this anymore, because I really think this means something. It's just, we're going to find out eventually. But I think it's more of like the XRP Ledger thing, and we need to build up liquidity in ODL before.
Yeah, they even kind of put out like a little bit of a disclaimer back in 2015 here, separating Symbiont and Counterparty. But what they did state is Counterparty is a core part of the Symbiont tech stack with entirely complementary technology to the other systems we are developing. In cases where a public network on public blockchain, in parentheses Bitcoin, solutions are most appropriate, Counterparty is the prime tool in our tool belt. So just interesting to kind of watch all the relationships going on. I think one of the last things I have here is kind of this private unlisted CBDC accelerator demo. Again, this was shared to me by one of my patrons, so I have to give a shout out there. But this is tying in R3, Bank for International Settlements, and the Indonesian Central Bank, talking about ushering in the future of money, certainly dealing in central bank digital currencies. So obviously, Bank Indonesia was something that I wanted to maybe dig into here. And all right, let me go to this. So this is a tweet that was put out by Ryan Zagone in 2017. Ryan Zagone, director of regulatory. Oh my God, I can't talk. Director of regulatory relations at Ripple, met with Bank Indonesia today about expanding Ripple. In this picture, Zagone is shown receiving a gift of raw, uncut bills from the head of payments in Indonesia. And of course, you go to the tweet, Darren, and the page doesn't exist anymore, obviously. I don't know how much is there either, but I mean, it's just always interesting to see those tie-ins. I do know 34 million accounts essentially within Fidelity are now rumored to essentially be able to reach out and touch alternative assets. What are your kind of thoughts on like the institutional grade custody, different aspects within traditional finance being able to reach out and touch into crypto? Because I know we've seen that consistently.
Well, I mean, like when we looked at the chart, right, we have the sideways action. I think the next top for all of this is when this institutional money flushes into crypto, and then we still have utility after that. So, I think this is the floodgates. Once there's regulatory clarity, this money will be pushed into crypto, and it's going to be the next leg up. But it might take a while. Christian Carlo, some of the other people that are active with regulations, they're estimating like 2024, early 2024, late 2024, end of 2023, that type of area, which would be perfect for the charts, because we have to have this accumulation zone before you can go higher. You got to build a base before you move up higher. So, this is all natural stuff that needs to happen. And what's good for us is we're able to buy cheaper crypto. So, don't get too upset with lower prices. It's an opportunity for us. I will say something about the Ryan Zagone tweet that you had.
Yeah.
So the Bank of Indonesia, I believe, is Mojo Loop as well. Bangladesh, that whole area is connected to Mojo Loop. So I think, like I've said earlier, this is a network that's going to be accessible to all of these payment systems. That's why you saw, Ripple have a partner, Ripple have some type of connection with 60-something central banks. Those are regulatory agencies that allow this technology to happen. So they need to meet with them to just have this interoperable with the rest of their payment system. So, I think all these connections are set up for Ripple to be active in these areas. So we'll see more information as time comes out. Maybe there's doing something with a CBDC or something like that too, but we don't know yet. But what I do know is I think all these jurisdictions are allowing Ripple. That's why you saw the PDFs and tweets and everything about different central banks in different countries.
I always love and I know how much you research too. My favorite things are deleted tweets. and the error 404 codes that you get when you go to websites where they've just said, oh shit, we're going to completely omit, anything that we talked about. I think that you run into that with the NASHA, or the automated clearinghouse in the United States stuff about Ripple being at the base of the payment infrastructure back in like 2016 or whenever they were putting out that stuff. And a lot of that stuff is 404 now within those sites. I also think it's interesting that every time you see a major article about kind of like institutional grade adoption, it always is phrased around Bitcoin. And it's like, now Bitcoin is coming to 34 million brokerage accounts. It's not just about Bitcoin. It's about this entire asset class, reaching out and accessing all these brokerage accounts. And as regulatory clarity comes, certain assets will be offered. Certain assets will certainly have to meet the due diligence checks that these organizations are doing, but it's never been just about Bitcoin. It's about the whole space, right?
It's a lot to do with advertisers, right? Like a lot of advertisers are focused around Bitcoin and everything. So, and also it's probably like safe for them to say since it's been declared a commodity, right? So like they can't get in trouble for promoting unregistered securities or anything like that. So maybe that's the reason they always focus it around Bitcoin.
Yesterday we saw, and we'll leave you guys with this, the chairman of the CFTC, Caroline Pham, essentially stopping by a tour, just arbitrarily visiting Ripple Labs, thanking Brad Garlinghouse. I don't know. I just find it so interesting. Obviously, CFTC is Commodity Futures Trading Commission, regulates derivatives markets, including future swaps and certain kinds of options. Yeah, so I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but it's so crazy. We're just like kind of watching this show, right? Like unfold. Like I don't know any other way to put it. Like we've been here long enough to realize that the majority of what we see and have access to is a show, right?
It's a long movie. We know the ending. We're just watching it all play out, and it's a very long movie. But I mean, the CFTC is very friendly towards crypto. I've heard Brad Garlinghouse talk about a proposed regulation that would put the CFTC in charge of crypto. He said, you should be voting for that. I don't remember the name off the top of my head, but very friendly to crypto. I saw Caroline Pham in an interview. Well, it was like kind of like a talk with several speakers, right? One of the speakers was this Harvard economist that kind of like hated crypto, and like everything she said was very nasty about crypto. And Carolyn interjects while she's speaking and kind of like proves that she's wrong with a few aspects. And she started talking about the CFTC. It was pretty funny. I'm gonna probably make a video on it, but it's pretty funny, funny speech and everything. So I'll make a video on that. But yeah, I think the CFTC is great, and having Brad Garlinghouse as a picture, like you said, it's a big movie. Everybody's in cahoots too. I don't think like there's bad guys. Like I know there's this narrative of, like all these networks trying to get regulatory capture, and they're just trying to throw wrenches in the works and everything. But I don't necessarily think that that's the way it is. I think, more of everybody's Ripple especially is a very wealthy company, and I think they're in the seats, in the backroom deals, and this was necessary to happen.
Yep. No, I couldn't agree more, dude. Hey, I appreciate your time, Darren. I hope you guys all appreciated this podcast. Again, we're gonna try to get these out. We're gonna try to do 2 a week and really just try to nail them out and just be more consistent with them. And yeah, I appreciate everybody's time, and definitely look forward to doing more of these in the future. So thank you guys very much, and we'll see you guys when we see you.